Seches Bava Kamma Daf Samach Ches begins discussing a halacha said by Rav. The Gemara is asking questions on it. Rav had said on the Mishnah that said that if someone steals from a thief, he doesn't have to pay kefel. On that, Rav had said that that's only if the original thief did not acquire it, and he could acquire it through yish of the original owner. So if Reuven had an object, and then it got stolen by Shimon, and then it was stolen from Shimon by Levi. So Reuven is the original owner. If he's miyayish, says Rav, that yish makes Levi, the thief, the current owner. Of course, he still has to pay for it, but he's the owner. And therefore, when Shimon comes and steals from him, he's stealing from the owner. And therefore, he has to pay kefil. So Rav's chiddush is that Reuven's yish makes Shimon kaina, and now he has all the halachas of being the owner. Now, the Gemara says the same thing should be true then. If Shimon were to go and sell it or shacht it now, he shouldn't have to pay daled v'hei because he is selling and slaughtering something which belongs to him. It's not a stolen object anymore, it's his. So the Gemara has already asked one question on this. Now we're up to the Gemara's second question. The Gemara quotes a brisa that says that the payment of the daled v'hei, which applies to when Shimon slaughters or steals it, puts the two together. It puts slaughtering and stealing together, and they have to be similar, which means they're just like slaughtering cannot be undone. It has to be a sale which cannot be undone. It has to be a sale which is chal, it's final. So that means that when Shimon sold it to Yankel, so Yankel has to acquire it and be a permanent kinyan. So Mar assumes that that means that Shimon was the owner, or that Shimon at least had it in a way that Reuven can't claim it back. That means that it must have been after yish of Reuven. If it wasn't after Reuven's yish, then Reuven can go get it back from Yaakov because Reuven owned it. Someone else stole it and sold it while he was never miyayish. So the Gemara assumes, therefore, what the Gemara means that what the brisa means to say is that this has to be after yish. So my question is that if it's after yish, and Rav's right that yish makes it klineh to Shimon the thief, so then when Shimon sells it, why is he have to pay daled v'hei at all? It's his now. So to that, the Gemara answers, no, that's not what the Rashi was referring to at all. Really, every time you do a mechira and you have to pay the daled v'hei, that's referring to before yish. And it's not a real sale, it's a valid sale, but Reuven, the original owner, can get it back because it was his. What the Gemara means is that the sale that Shimon sold it to Yankel has to be a regular, permanent sale, at least in the books as to how they wrote it up. It can't be a temporary sale. It can't be that he sold it for 30 days. If he does that, he doesn't have to pay the daled v'hei for that. The Gemara now gets into its next raya against Rav, which will be a lengthy brisa and a lengthy discussion. The brisa has 3 cases. We'll establish that we're talking about after yish. Then we'll show we have a kasha from 2 of the 3 cases. And then we'll have 2 answers, 2 ways of explaining it, one of which will change Pshat and the Brisa altogether. So the Brisa says as follows: 3 halachas about a Reuven owned something, Shimon stole it, and then it got stolen from Shimon. So in the first case, Reuven owned it, Shimon stole it, and then Levi stole it from Shimon, straight up. A case just like in our Mishnah. The halacha is that Shimon has to pay kefil because he stole from the original owner. Levi only has to pay once because he stole from the thief, and Groinev min haganav doesn't pay a kefil, like our Mishnah said, because the Torah says v'gunav mi beis ha'ish. It's only where it's stolen from the owner. Okay, straightforward. Second case, Shimon stole it from Reuven, then Shimon sold it. Let's say he sold it to Yankel, and then Levi came and stole it from Yankel. He stole it from the buyer. So now Shimon has to pay daled v'hei, says the brisa, because he stole and sold it. Levi, who stole it from the buyer, he has to pay kefil because the buyer is the rightful owner. He's the original owner who is koine it. The Gemara assumes he was koine with shina rishus, and the shina rishus is koine, therefore belongs to the buyer. Levi, who stole it from the rightful owner, now has to pay kefil. Now, the third case is where Shimon stole from Reuven and he shachted it, so Shimon has to pay daled v'hei, of course. Then Levi came and he stole the already shechted animal. So in this situation, he only has to pay once. He only has to pay keren. He doesn't have to pay kefil. And the Gemara is going to focus on this as well as to why that should be. Now, the Gemara's kasha sets up as follows. First of all, this has to be talking about after yish. If it's before yish, so then in the middle case, why would Levi have to pay kefil? He shouldn't have to be kefil. There's only shinu rishus without yish. Shinu rishus without yish is not koinet, and therefore Yankel the buyer wasn't koinet, and Levi shouldn't have to pay kefil to him. So it has to be referring to where it's achar yish. This entire thing is after yish. Now I can understand why there's yish and shinu rishus. That's why he has to pay kefil. The problem is there are two problems. Number one, why should Shimon have to pay dalad v'hei? If there was yish, according to Rav, yish is kleina. So once Shimon's kleina it's his. He doesn't have to pay dalad v'hei anymore because he sold and shechted what belonged to him. That's question number one. Question number two is going back to the Reisha. The first case, why should Levi have to pay only once? He should have to pay kefil, because if there was yish, then it belongs to Shimon. And then when Levi steals from Shimon, then he stole from the rightful owner, and now he has to pay kefil as well. Why does he only have to pay once? That's the Gemara's two kashas. Therefore, this proves that yish is not kleina against what Rav said. So the Gemara is going to give two answers. So Rav defends himself, first of all, by saying there's another kasha on the brisa. The brisa doesn't make sense anyway. You have to change pshat and the brisa altogether. What's the kasha? Kasha's on the seifa, the third case. There, the third person, the second thief, that is, Levi, he only has to pay once. Boaz has to pay once. He stole it after Shechita. That means Shimon stole it and he shechted it. So that's Shini Rishus and Shini Maisa. Forget Rav's discussion of Yish. Shini Maisa, everyone knows Shini Maisa is Kaineh. So it belongs to Shimon for sure, and therefore when Levi steals it, he should have to pay kefil. Why doesn't he have to pay kefil there? Says Rav, therefore al kachach you have to switch the psak in the second case and the third case. Once you do that, everything fits with me beautifully. We are referring to where it was before Yish. There's no Yish here. The middle case, the second case, now reads as follows. Shimon stole it. He has to pay dalad v'hei because he sold it. He went ahead and he sold it to Yaakov. There's no Yish, and therefore it's not his. He has to pay 4 and 5, no problem. Now, why? What happens afterwards? Levi steals it from the buyer. Levi only has to pay one time because there's Shini Rishos without Yish. And where we changed the psak here, we took the psak from the Sefer. He only has to pay once, not twice. And since we're talking about without Yish, there's Shini Rishos, no Yish, he has to pay once, and that's why that fits beautifully. Now, in the third case, where Shimon stole it, shechted it, and then Levi stole the shechted animal, so now we change psak, and now you have to pay, Levi has to pay kefil. Now why does he have to pay kefil? Fits beautifully, not because of Yish, not because of any kinyan, except for Shini Maisa. Because the Shechita happened as a Shini Maisa, that's why he has to pay kefil. So really we're talking about before Yish, had there been Yish, everything would be clean and no problem. That's Gemara's first approach. Now, Rav Papa says, no, he will defend Pshat and the Brisa only without defending Rav, and then Rav Zvid will say how it fits into Rav. So Rav Papa says, you don't have to switch the Psak and the Brisa. The kasha that we asked on the third case, why when Levi stole the shechted animal, does he not have to pay kefil? Shouldn't Shimon have been claimed with Shina Maisa? The answer to that is, this is Beishami's opinion, who doesn't hold of Shina Maisa. And therefore, Shina Maisa is not koina, and therefore, when Levi steals it, he only has to pay once, because he's grand of Menaganef, just like our original Mishnah. Now, so if you're not changing Pshat, so now we still have our two kashas on Rav. So Rav Zvid answers them as follows. Rav Zvid answers, there was a Yish, but the Yish happened in between. So let's talk about the middle case. Shimon stole it from Reuven. Reuven was not Miyayish. Shimon went ahead and sold it. Reuven has not been Miyayish yet, therefore Shimon has to pay Dalad V'hei, because there was no Yish. Had there been Yish, it would have belonged to Shimon, you're right, like Rav said, but there was no Yish. Now, while the buyer, Yankel, is holding it, now there's Yish. So now is when Levi steals it from him, now Levi has to pay kefil, because at this point there was Yish. So for Levi there was Yish, and that's why he has to pay kefil. For Shimon there was no Yish, and that's why he has to pay Dalad V'hei. Now, in the original case, the first case, where Reuven had it, then it was stolen by Shimon. Shimon has to pay kefil, of course. He stole from the original owner. Levi doesn't have to pay kefil because, again, there was no yish just after the theft of Shimon. So both of the cases after the theft of Shimon, there was no yish. When there was a sale, there was a yish after that. Now, had it not been for Rav, you could have learned pshat in the first case, was that Levi doesn't have to pay a kefil because it doesn't belong to Shimon because there's no yish plus shini rishus. It was still in the rishus of Shimon. But now that we're saying pshat is Rav, we're talking about before yish, there was no yish at all. Had it been just yish, even without shini rishus, it would have been koina and belonged to Shimon, and then Levi would have to pay a kefil to that. Now, the reason why the Mishnah chose this case, or the Brisa chose this case, which is complex, because we wanted to come up in the middle case, we wanted to come up with a situation in which everybody has to pay full, in which Shimon has to pay Daled V'Hei, and Levi has to pay kefil. The only way that could be is if by Shimon there was no yish, that's why he has to pay Daled V'Hei, but by Levi there was yish, and that's why he's stealing from the rightful owner, and he has to pay a kefil. There's no other situation in which that could work out. The Gemara now introduces two more opinions for a total of three opinions as to where along the yish process do you have to be chayev daled v'hei for selling an animal that you stole. So we've already seen Rav opinions as you can only be chayev if it's before yish. Once it's yish, it belongs to you. You're not chayev any longer. Rav Sheishes, the opposite extreme, holds that it's only after yish. Because if it be before yish, then the sale won't be chal. It'll still belong to the original owner. It won't transfer. There's no yish and shini rishus. You don't have the yish. Therefore, it has to be after yish. Only then is it a sale which is not chayzer. It's a complete sale. And only then you have to pay daled v'hei. Obviously, he's not bothered by what Rav says, that yish is kaina, and it's already the thief's when he steals it if there's yish, because he doesn't hold like that. Now, Rav Nachman doesn't hold that way either. However, it doesn't hold the Rav Sheishes either. Therefore, Rav Nachman says it doesn't matter. It could be before yish, it could be after yish. The Torah says if you steal it and sell it, he stole it and he sold it. It doesn't matter that it really belongs to the original owner, because it doesn't have to be a sale that is halachically valid, and it doesn't matter that if it was after yish and it belongs to and it may theoretically belong to the thief, because it doesn't belong to the thief even after yish happens. These are the three opinions. We're now focus on the machlokes between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheishes. Does it have to be a sale that is valid? It's a hani maisav, what the Gemara refers to, even if it's invalid and it actually still belongs to the original owner. The Gemara now brings proof. First, you have Rav Sheishes, who says, my source is Rabbi Kiva, who said that the reason that the Torah says you have to pay daled v'hei if you sell something is because it's an ishtarish, because it takes root, and that the theft becomes finalized because he sold it to someone else. Now, if it is not chal, if it's not a hani maisav, then the sale is not finalized. It still belongs to Reuven, the original owner. So therefore, you see, it must be talking about after yish where it's finalized. Says the Gemara, no. Rava says that that's not. He doesn't mean that it takes root and it's finalized. It just means that it's a repetition of the original sin. First he stole it, then he sold it. He's transferring the ownership and the possession further and further from the original owner. That's why I have to pay a daled v'hei. The Gemara now brings another raya, very similar to the first one we have against Rav. The Brisa says that the daled v'hei is for sale or slaughter. The two have to be similar, just like slaughter is irreversible. The sale has to be irreversible. So you see, it has to be after yish in order that it should be irreversible. So no, irreversible, we just mean that it's not a sale just for 30 days. The Gemara now brings in a fourth Amar here. This is Rabbi Elazar, and he holds, just like Rav Sheishes, that it has to be after yish, but he takes a step further. He says it's always after yish. Says Rav Elazar, how do you know that anytime you steal something, there is an instant yish? We assume that the owner knows about it and he's married right away. It must be, because the Torah says you're chayav for selling something, you're chayav for daled v'hei, and it has to be after yish, and that's how we know that he holds like Rav Sheishes. Has to be after yish, and with the way he says that, he knows that it has to be after yish is because it has to be just like slaughter. Just like slaughter is irreversible, the sale also has to be irreversible, therefore it has to be after yish, can't be undone. And therefore, how could you ever be chayiv daled v'hei? Maybe there's no yish. Says Rabbi Elazar, you see from here that there is an automatic yish. You assume there's an automatic yish. Now, the Gemara has some questions on that assumption. So the Gemara says, how do you know that that's the truth? Maybe you don't need yish. How do you know that there has to be a yish and there's an automatic yish? Say the opposite. Say that that you don't have to have yish. So the Gemara says, no. Again, just like slaughter, which is chal, it's a hane maisav, so the sale also has to be chal, has to be a hane maisav. So the Gemara says, well, maybe in the cases where we heard that he was a Me'ash. We heard the person say, oh yeah, I gave a pope. And that's the case where the Torah is Mechayev you on Dal V'Hei, but otherwise not. The Gemara says no, because again it has to be like slaughter. Slaughter is viable right away. As soon as he steals it, he could slaughter it on the spot. He doesn't have to wait for anything. So the sale also has to be something he could do on the spot, not that he has to wait until we hear him being Me'ash, that the slaughter would be Mechayev him Dal V'Hei. Gemara now brings in two more opinions, Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So Rav Yochanan says they could bring you a proof that before Yush there is a chiyuv, you have to pay Dal V'Hei, and that's from somebody who kidnaps someone, what we call Genevas HaNefesh. There the Torah is Mechayev, even though there's no Yish, even though a person's not Me'ash on himself, so there's no Yish here for sure, and yet you're still Chayev for it. So that proves that Rav Yochanan holds that there is chiyuv before Yish. The question is, what about after Yish? Does he agree with Reverend? Does he hold like Rav that there is no Dal V'Hei after Yish or not? So the Gemara quotes Machlokes Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish on that. Rav Yochanan says not like Rav. Rav Yochanan says there is Yish, there is Dal V'Hei after Yish. So that means he ends up holding like Rav Nachman, that whether before Yish or after Yish is still Dal V'Hei. Rish Lakish holds like Rav, that after Yish there can be no Dal V'Hei because the Ganef owns it. Okay, now the Gemara brings a raya that Rav Yochanan brought to Rish Lakish. The raya that says if somebody steals something and he's makdash it, and then he shechts it. So what's the halacha? So he has to pay kefil for the fact that he stole it. He does not have to pay dalad v'hei because it already belongs to hektish by the time he was sheichid it, and there is no dalad v'hei on something which belongs to hektish. Actually, it says because there's no kefil anymore. Once it belongs to hektish, the Torah says that kefil is only paid to re'eyu, not to hektish, and if there's no kefil, there can't be dalad v'hei. So now it says Rav Yochanan, how was he makdish it? If it was before Yish, it's not his to be makdish. So it must be after Yish. So talking about after Yish, and the only reason that he doesn't have to pay Dalad V'Hei is because it belongs to Hektish. Clearly, though, Dalad V'Hei does apply after Yish. So the right to me against you says Rish Lakish in response, no, we're not talking about where he was makdish it before, that he was able to be makdish it because the original owner was Miyayish. We're talking about the original owner was makdish it. Not that the thief was makdish it, but that the owner was makdish it, and that's why it's Hektish. Says Gemara, is it chal hektish in a situation like that? We have a statement of Rav Yochanan earlier that if somebody steals something and there's no yish, so the original owner can't be makdish because it's not in his possession, and the thief can't be makdish because he doesn't own it. So you see, you have to have possession of it to be makdish. So what's Rish Lakish talking about, that the owner was makdish even though he doesn't have it? The Gemara answers there is an opinion that holds that it works. This is the Tznuin, the Tzadikim. We have a Mishnah that discusses if someone has Kerem Revai in his field. Kerem Revai has the same halacha as Meiser Sheni. You're not allowed to eat it until you bring it to Yerushalayim. And this person has Kerem Revai in his field, and people are coming by and they're eating it. They're really stealing his things, but they're eating it. The problem is they're eating Kerem Revai, which they're not allowed to eat. So what does he do? He takes money, sets it aside, and says at the beginning of each day, anything which somebody steals from my field today is mecholol on this money. And then the money is mitztaber, collects the kedushas Kerem Revai that he's going to take to Yerushalayim afterwards. So it's very nice of him. Question is, how does it work? The person took the fruit from him, and then he wants to be mechalet. How does he transfer the kedusha if it's not in his possession? We said he can't transfer kedusha if it's not in your possession. So you see, these snuim hold that you can, and therefore that's the opinion that we're using here as well. Gemara asks though, if the original owner is makdashit, if that's pshat here, so then how come he gets paid kefil? How come he gets returned the theft? He shouldn't get returned the theft because he was makdashit. Therefore, he got his property back and he gave it to Hektish. So why does he get the original? Why does he get the Karen? Why does he get the kefil? My answer is the situation is where they already had the psak. They had the hamad b'din, they had the psak that he has to return it, that he's a thief, before the guy was makdashit. He was makdashit afterwards. So therefore, he has to pay him for it, and then he's makdashit. So the Gemara says, okay, how is this psak issued? If he was told, go give it to him, so the halacha is that if somebody shechts or sells after he's told to go give it to him, he's no longer chayiv dalad v'hei because he's a gazlan now, and there's no dalad v'hei on him. Once he's known that he has to give it, he's a gazlan, and therefore you shouldn't have to pay dalad v'hei even if he wasn't makdish it. So the Gemara says it must be the other circumstances which he wasn't said go give it to him. He was told you are obligated to return it to him. When he told you are obligated to return it to him, he's still a thief. He's not told to go give it, and therefore if he is gonna slaughter it or sell it, he would still be chayiv dalad v'hei in that circumstance.